The laughter and music blurred into a soft hum as I stood there in my wedding dress, still clutching the bouquet that smelled like lilies and sea salt. The afternoon sun caught the silver trim of the BMW parked near the garden archway, a perfect mirror of the sky. Moments earlier, Ethan's parents had pressed a small velvet box into my hands. Inside was a key fob gleaming like a promise. "Welcome to the family, sweetheart," his mother Elaine said with tears in her eyes. "You're the daughter we never had." I almost cried right there. After years of feeling invisible, those words wrapped around me like warmth after a long winter. But before I could thank her, my mother appeared out of nowhere smiling, the kind of smile that meant danger. She slipped her arm through mine, her voice sugar-coated and sharp. "Emma, honey, your sister really needs that car. She just started her job downtown. Be a good girl and give it to her." I froze, still hearing the laughter from the guests behind me. My father nodded from a few feet away, as if sealing the verdict. "She deserves it more than you." In that moment, the air left my lungs. I could feel the silk of my dress tighten against my ribs, my palms damp. I'd spent 10 years saying yes to them. But standing there in front of everyone, I decided this time I would say no. Ethan was still across the terrace talking to his cousins, oblivious to the quiet ambush unfolding in the corner. My mother leaned closer. "Don't make a scene. You've always been generous. Think of this as helping your family." Her tone was sweet, her words rehearsed. That phrase, "helping your family," had been the leash around my neck for a decade. Every job, every paycheck, every sleepless night. I looked at her then, at the car gleaming in the sun, and something inside me snapped. "Mom," I said softly, trying to keep my voice from trembling, "that's my wedding gift." She sighed like I'd disappointed her. "Emma, family shares everything. You've always been the practical one. You don't even drive that much, do you?" "Chloe's commute is brutal." I wanted to laugh, but nothing came out. My throat burned. Behind her, guests posed for photos, unaware of the war being waged in whispers. I caught a glimpse of Ethan's mother chatting happily with my bridesmaids, her face lit with kindness. The contrast made me dizzy. My mother's fingers tightened on my wrist. "Don't ruin this day with your stubbornness." That word, stubbornness, was how she described every moment I'd ever tried to stand up for myself. I'd been stubborn when I asked them to handle their own bills. Stubborn when I told them I couldn't cover Chloe's tuition one semester. Stubborn when I said I wanted to save for my own future. In their language, stubborn meant selfish. Selfish meant free. I forced a smile, the same practiced one I'd worn through every family dinner and guilt trip. "We'll talk later," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You're not refusing, are you?" Before I could answer, Ethan appeared beside me. His hand brushed my shoulder, grounding me. "Everything okay here?" His tone was calm, but his eyes searched mine. I swallowed hard, afraid the truth would spill out and ruin everything. "Just family stuff," I murmured. His mother called us toward the dance floor, announcing the first toast. My mother stepped back, smoothing her dress as if nothing had happened. "Remember, Emma," she whispered, "your sister needs this more than you." Then she smiled brightly and walked away to join my father. Ethan leaned closer. "What was that about?" I shook my head. "Nothing important," but the lie tasted bitter, because deep down I knew this moment would haunt me. This wasn't new, it was the same script my family had followed for years. They took, I gave. They demanded, I complied. But not today. Not on the day I promised myself a new beginning. As we walked toward the cake table, Ethan slipped his arm around my waist. "You look tense," he said softly. "I can tell when something's off." I met his eyes and tried to smile. "I'm fine. Just overwhelmed." He kissed my temple. "You don't have to handle everything alone anymore. You know that, right?" Those words almost undid me, because for as long as I could remember, I had handled everything alone. Bills, debts, hospital calls, tuition payments. Responsibility had become my identity. But now, as the music swelled and the photographer called for us to pose, I felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of rebellion. A quiet voice inside whispering, "You don't owe them your happiness." The rest of the evening unfolded in fragments. Glasses clinking. A breeze off the water lifting my veil. My sister Chloe laughing too loudly near the bar, showing off the designer shoes I'd bought her last Christmas. My parents pretending to be the picture of grace while plotting in corners. Every time I caught their gaze, they looked away first. I could feel the memory of that single sentence echoing through my chest. She deserves it more than you. It wasn't just about a car. It was about every sacrifice I'd made that went unseen. Every dream postponed, every boundary crossed, every ounce of dignity traded for their approval. Later, as the guests danced under the string lights, I slipped away to the garden path behind the venue. The night air was cool, quiet, except for the faint hum of the ocean. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. 10 years of exhaustion pressed down on me all at once. I could still see myself at 19, sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills, my father's cast resting on a chair, my mother wringing her hands. "You'll have to take over for a while," she'd said. "We'll pay you back when things get better." Things never got better. A voice pulled me back to the present. "There you are." Ethan stepped onto the path, his tie loosened, his smile soft. "Your mom cornered me earlier," he said. "She wanted to know if I'd be open to sharing the car, whatever that means." I stared at him, stunned. "She asked you that?" He nodded slowly. I told her no. Then I told her the car is yours. End of discussion. For a moment I couldn't speak. The wind rustled the hem of my dress, and I realized I was shaking not from fear but from relief. "You shouldn't have to deal with them," I said. He shrugged. "Maybe not. But I'm not letting anyone guilt you out of your own happiness." His eyes searched mine. "Emma, you don't have to give them anything anymore." The words hit like a lifeline. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath until then. Somewhere inside me a door opened, a door that had been locked since I was 19. I took his hand, the wedding band catching the light. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear that." "Then remember it," he said. "Whatever they say next, remember this moment." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. Behind us, the laughter and music rose again. To everyone else, it was a perfect wedding night. To me, it was the moment everything began to unravel. That night, as we drove away from the venue, I looked out the window at the BMW gliding down the highway beside us. My reflection stared back, makeup, smudged veil, gone eyes clear. For the first time, I didn't see the daughter who fixed everything. I saw a woman ready to start over. I didn't know it yet, but that single decision to keep what was mine would change everything that came after. The morning after the wedding, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the sound of waves hitting the shore outside our hotel window. For a second, I forgot everything, the laughter, the cake, the way Ethan looked at me under those string lights. But then, like a whisper sneaking through the cracks of my mind, I heard her voice again. "She deserves it more than you." It echoed so clearly that I thought I was still dreaming. I turned onto my side, watching Ethan sleep peacefully beside me. He looked weightless, untouched by the storm that had unfolded only hours before. I envied that. Because even on my honeymoon, I couldn't stop replaying the scene, my mother's cold smile, my father's nod, Chloe's smug expression across the room. It all blurred together into one truth: I had spent my entire life being their solution. 10 years earlier, I was 19 and halfway through my accounting degree at the University of South Carolina. I had plans, internships, a small apartment with my best friend, a normal future. Then one night my phone rang during study group. It was Mom, her voice trembling. "Your father's been in an accident." Everything after that felt like moving underwater. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. I found Dad in a hospital bed, his leg in a brace, his face pale. "A construction site collapse," they said. "Broken femur too, cracked ribs, possible nerve damage. He's lucky to be alive," the doctor told us. But when I saw my mother's blank stare, I realized luck was a luxury we couldn't afford. The bills came fast, faster than the insurance approvals, faster than our savings could stretch. Mom hadn't worked in over 20 years. She'd been a stay-at-home wife since marrying Dad at 19. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered one night, surrounded by envelopes she couldn't bring herself to open. And just like that, I decided for her. I left school mid-semester, promising I'd go back once Dad gets better. But weeks turned into months, and the space between who I was and who I had to be kept growing wider. My first job was at a diner off Highway 17. It paid minimum wage and the tips barely covered gas, but it was something. I worked from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m., slept 4 hours, and spent mornings applying for anything that said entry level. The day I got hired as a data entry assistant at a small software company in Charleston, Mom cried with relief. "You've always been good with computers," she said. "Maybe this is God's plan." I nodded, even though it didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like a trade. At first I didn't mind. I was proud to help, proud to see Dad home from the hospital and walking with a cane. I told myself it was temporary, but temporary became expected faster than I noticed. Each month new bills arrived. "You're so good with money," Mom would say, handing me another envelope. "You can handle the mortgage better than I can." When I hesitated, she added softly, "You wouldn't want us to lose the house, would you?" And that was that. The question was never a question. It was a command wrapped in guilt. Meanwhile, Chloe was living her best college life in Atlanta. She went to a private school, joined a sorority, traveled for spring break, and sent me texts that started with, "Hey sis, can you help me out just this one time?" Those one times became tuition fees, book costs, rent payments, and eventually credit, card bills she didn't understand. When I visited her dorm one weekend, she introduced me to her friends as my sister who works in computers. Not the one who keeps us afloat. Not the reason I can be here. Just the boring sister with the steady job. I used to think the distance between us was because of age. But looking back, it was entitlement disguised as innocence. Chloe didn't mean to be cruel. She simply believed the world would take care of her. And in our family, I was the world. After 2 years at the company, my boss noticed I was good with numbers and logic. "You're wasted in data entry," she said. "I'll move you to development." The promotion came with a 30% raise. I cried in my car after signing the paperwork, not from joy but from exhaustion. I thought the extra money would finally mean freedom. Instead, it meant more responsibility. "You're doing so well," Mom said when I told her. "Now you can help a little more." A little more became utilities, Dad's therapy, Mom's medication, and Chloe's off-campus apartment. Every time I thought I'd reached the limit, they found another way to stretch it. I started skipping meals to pay off the credit cards I'd maxed, helping them. I moved into a studio apartment with paper-thin walls and peeling paint. My friends were graduating, getting jobs, traveling. I was learning how to fix a leaky faucet because calling a plumber was a luxury we can't afford. I kept reminding myself, once Chloe graduates, things will change. Once she gets a job, she'll help. We'll be a team. That hope kept me alive for years. When she finally graduated with a marketing degree, I drove 6 hours to attend the ceremony. Watching her walk across that stage, I felt something close to pride. I thought we made it, but I didn't know that we had always meant me. Chloe's first paycheck went to a designer handbag. Her second funded a weekend trip to Nashville. Her third was for a new wardrobe. Image is everything in marketing. When I asked if she planned to start contributing at home, she laughed. "Emma, I'm just starting out. You're established. You understand." I did understand. I understood that the more capable I became, the less they saw me as family, and the more they saw me as infrastructure. The following Christmas proved it. I worked double shifts to cover the mortgage and gifts. Chloe came home with manicured nails and an Instagram-perfect boyfriend. Mom fawned over her dress, her hair, her career energy. When I handed Mom an envelope of cash to help with expenses, she smiled politely and said, "You're so practical, dear." Chloe giggled. "That's Emma for you, the reliable one. The reliable one. The invisible one. The one they never worried about because she never complained." That night I drove back to Charleston in silence. The highway lights blurred into streaks of gold through my tears. I thought about the life I'd planned, the degree, the apartment, the trips I'd never taken, and realized I couldn't remember the last thing I'd done purely for myself. Every decision revolved around someone else's comfort. Every success became another reason to keep sacrificing. One evening, as I sat surrounded by unpaid bills, Chloe's social media feed popped up, her smiling in Paris, with the caption, "Living my best life." I stared at the photo for a long time. It didn't make me angry. It made me hollow. Because deep down I knew she wasn't the villain. We'd both been shaped by the same machine, one that rewarded dependency and punished strength. They called me the strong one because it excused their weakness. I looked around my apartment, the flickering bulb, the stack of receipts, the half-eaten takeout on the counter. I whispered out loud, maybe, just to hear it said, "I'm not strong. I'm stuck." For years, I believed love meant giving everything until there was nothing left. But sitting there under the buzz of that dying light, I finally asked myself the question I'd never dared to before. When do I get to live for me? That night, I opened my laptop and typed in Tech Conferences 2020. It wasn't a big plan, not yet, just a spark. A way to remember who I was before I became their provider. I didn't know it then, but that single search would lead me to Savannah, to the man who'd change everything, and to the first person who would ever look at me and see more than what I could give. The picture hung in my parents' hallway right above the dining room door, a gold frame with Chloe's graduation photo. She was glowing in her navy cap and gown, holding a bouquet of roses, smiling like she'd just conquered the world. Every time I visited, my mother would point at it as if I might have forgotten. "We're so proud of her," she'd say. I'd nod, pretending not to notice there wasn't a single photo of me on that wall. I told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was that Chloe had her degree, her career, her independence. Things would finally be different now. We'd take care of Mom and Dad together. It was a comforting fantasy, one I clung to even when reality started to crack. When Chloe landed her first job at a marketing agency in Atlanta, she called me late at night, buzzing with excitement. "It's small, but it's a start," she said. "I'll finally be able to help around the house." I smiled into the phone. "That's great, Chloe. I'm proud of you." For the first time in years, I felt like the weight might finally lift. I pictured us splitting the bills, maybe even saving enough to take our parents on a trip someday. But by the time her first paycheck arrived, that hope started to crumble. 2 weeks later, she posted a picture of herself, holding a designer handbag with the caption, "First big purchase. Gotta look the part." I double-tapped the photo but felt my stomach twist. When I called to congratulate her, she laughed. "Come on, appearances matter in my field. You don't understand marketing." I let it slide, telling myself she deserved to celebrate. She'd been in school for years. But then the second paycheck came, and she used it for a trip to Nashville with her friends. The third went to redecorating her apartment. By the time I realized she hadn't sent Mom or Dad a dime, the month's mortgage had already come out of my account again. I tried to talk to her about it gently. "Chloe, maybe we can work out a system," I said over the phone one Sunday, "just so it's not all falling on me." She sighed dramatically. "Emma, I just started this job. I'm not made of money. Once I'm settled, I'll help. I promise." It was the same tone Mom used when she said, "We'll pay you back." A promise that sounded like mercy but meant delay. I hung up feeling foolish for expecting anything else. Christmas that year was when I finally saw how deep the favoritism ran. I drove home after working an overnight shift, carrying a bag full of small, carefully chosen gifts. Warm socks for Dad, a new blanket for Mom, a pair of earrings Chloe had mentioned months ago. When I walked in, Chloe was already there, wearing a sparkling dress that probably cost more than my rent. She'd brought her boyfriend Ryan, a finance guy with perfect teeth, and the kind of handshake that makes you feel like you're being judged. Mom couldn't stop smiling. "Isn't she radiant?" she said, pouring him another glass of wine. Dad laughed at Ryan's jokes while I sat quietly helping to serve food like an extra pair of hands. After dinner, we gathered in the living room for presents. Mom's tree glowed with white lights, the kind she insisted were classier than colored ones. Chloe handed out gifts wrapped in shimmering paper, all small trinkets but beautifully presented. When it was my turn, I gave Mom and Dad an envelope. Inside was a check enough to cover the rest of the mortgage for that month. "Oh, honey, Mom," said, smiling politely. "You're always so practical." Chloe giggled. "That's our Emma, reliable as ever." The room laughed softly as if it were a compliment. But something about it stung. Reliable, boring, predictable. I forced a smile and stared at the twinkling tree lights until they blurred. Later that night, I caught a glimpse of Chloe's phone screen as she snapped a family photo. The caption read, "Christmas with my favorite people." When she posted it, an hour later, my name wasn't tagged. For a second, I wondered if it was an accident. Then I realized it wasn't. I wasn't her favorite people. I was background noise, the dependable sister who kept things running while everyone else lived their lives. On the drive back to Charleston, snow began to fall. The highway was nearly empty, the world hushed except for the wipers squeaking against the windshield. I thought about every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no, every bill I'd paid, every dream I'd postponed. I wasn't angry yet. Just numb. I'd told myself that love required sacrifice, that good daughters didn't keep score. But sitting in that car, staring at the endless stretch of gray road, I began to wonder if maybe love wasn't supposed to feel like debt. The next few months blurred together. Chloe's calls became shorter, her requests more casual. "Can you cover Mom's prescription this month? I'm a little tight after that client dinner." Or, "I'll pay you back for Dad's physical therapy next paycheck." She never did. Mom would chime in to smooth things over. "She's just getting her footing. You know how hard it is starting out." Meanwhile, any time I hesitated, she'd sigh. "You're so capable, Emma. You've always been good with money." It was the same refrain I'd heard since 19, and every time she said it, I felt myself shrinking a little more. One Saturday afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house unannounced. Chloe was home for the weekend, sprawled across the couch with a face mask and her laptop open to online shopping tabs. Mom was making tea. "Chloe's had such a hard week," she said as I walked in. "Her boss was so demanding." I stared at my sister, manicured, glowing, carefree. "She looks like she's managing fine," I said quietly. Chloe smirked. "Don't be jealous, Em. Not everyone's meant for the high-stress corporate world." It was a joke, but not really. I turned to Mom, expecting her to say something, anything. She didn't. That night, I went home and opened my budgeting spreadsheet. The numbers didn't lie. Over the past 7 years, I'd contributed more than $200,000 to my family's expenses. Chloe had contributed nothing, and yet somehow she was still the golden child, the one they bragged about at church, the one who could do no wrong. The breaking point came a few months later. Chloe called sobbing. "My credit card's maxed out and rent's due. Can you transfer me something just until payday?" My instinct was to help. I opened my banking app, but the balance made me stop. My rent was due too. I hesitated for the first time in years. "Chloe, I can't," I said. Silence on the line. Then, cold as glass, she replied, "Wow, you've changed." I wanted to say, "Yes, I have," but instead I hung up. It was the first time I'd ever chosen not to save her. Days later, Mom called. "Your sister's upset," she said. "She says you refused to help when she was desperate." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. "I can't always fix everything." Mom sighed. "Family helps family, Emma. You know that." I almost laughed. Funny that rule never seems to apply to her. For once, Mom didn't have a response, just a long silence that told me she'd heard the truth but wasn't ready to face it. Weeks passed without speaking to Chloe. My life fell into quiet rhythm: work, home, sleep. Then one morning I opened my email and saw a message, subject Savannah Tech Summit. Registration confirmed. I'd forgotten I even signed up. For some reason, seeing it made my chest tighten. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, escape maybe, or just proof that there was still a version of me who belonged to something beyond their demands. On the night before the conference, I packed a small bag and looked around my apartment. For once, I didn't feel guilty leaving it all behind for a few days. I locked my phone, turned it face down, and whispered to the empty room, "I'm not their provider. Not anymore." It wasn't a declaration of rebellion. It was survival. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet decision to show up for myself would change everything. Because the next morning, in a crowded convention hall in Savannah, I was about to meet someone who would look at me and see more than the family ATM. He would see me. The convention center in Savannah was a maze of glass and light buzzing with voices and the faint hum of projectors. I stood near the entrance clutching my badge and wondering if I'd made a mistake coming. Everyone around me looked confident, composed, like they belonged here. I felt like an imposter with a borrowed purpose. My company had sent an open email about the summit, and I'd signed up impulsively one night, telling myself it was for work. But the truth was, I needed to remember who I was outside of invoices and family obligations. I hadn't realized until that morning how much of myself I'd forgotten. My booth was small, just a laptop, a poster, and a prototype of the sustainability app I'd been building in my spare time. I'd spent weeks coding it after hours long after the house had gone quiet and the calls from Mom had stopped for the night. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. People passed by, glanced, nodded politely. Then one man stopped. Tall, dark blonde hair, neatly rolled sleeves, the kind of calm confidence that didn't need to prove itself. He picked up the tablet and scrolled through my app. "You built this?" he asked. His voice was steady, curious. I nodded. Yes, it tracks small business carbon outputs and suggests ways to reduce them. He smiled. "That's brilliant. I'm Ethan Reed." He extended his hand, and I took it, surprised by the warmth in his grip. "I consult for eco-friendly startups. Your app could actually make compliance easier for small firms. Have you thought about licensing it?" The word licensing made me laugh nervously. I barely have time to sleep, let alone think that far ahead. He tilted his head. "You should. You've done something incredible here." For a second, I couldn't respond. Most men I met in tech circles treated me like a secretary who accidentally learned a code. Ethan wasn't like that. He wasn't talking down to me or trying to impress me. He was actually listening. We talked through the rest of the session, missing half the afternoon panels. He asked questions that made me think deeper about my own design. When I explained a glitch I hadn't been able to fix, he didn't interrupt. He just smiled and said, "You'll figure it out. I can tell you will." By the time the event closed, my cheeks hurt from smiling. We ended up in a small cafe across from the riverfront, the air heavy with the scent of roasted beans and rain. What started as a conversation about carbon tracking drifted into stories about our lives, his years consulting across states, my chaotic workdays balancing code and invoices. When I mentioned my family, I hesitated. I'd gotten so used to hiding that part of myself. "They're complicated," I said finally. Ethan didn't press. He just nodded and said, "Most families are. The question is how much space they take up in your life." That sentence lodged in my chest. I'd never thought of family as something that could take space. It had always been a weight I carried. The conference ended, but Ethan and I kept in touch. At first, it was emails about technical updates, questions, and ideas. Then it became small things, movie recommendations, weekend plans, photos of the sunrise he caught on early flights. One evening, after a long day of debugging, I found myself smiling at my screen because of a simple message he sent. "Don't forget to rest. You've earned it." It felt strange to be cared for without being needed. A month later, he invited me back to Savannah for coffee. Strictly business, he said, but when I arrived, his grin gave him away. We sat at the same cafe, and this time the air between us was easier. He asked about my project again, and I found myself talking more than I expected. When I finally told him why I'd had to leave college, how I'd become the family's primary provider, his face softened. "You've carried too much for too long," he said quietly. "You deserve to rest." I blinked hard, caught off guard by the tenderness in his tone. Nobody had ever said that to me, not once in 10 years. As our friendship grew, so did the fear. I didn't trust kindness. I'd learned that kindness often came with expectations with guilt attached. I waited for the moment he'd ask me for something in return the way my family always did. But he never did. When he offered to review my app's business model, I said, "I can't pay you." He smiled. I didn't ask for payment. It disarmed me. I wasn't used to help that didn't cost something. We started meeting halfway between Charleston and Savannah on weekends. Sometimes we talked about work, but mostly about everything else. Music, travel, what we'd do if money and time weren't constant obstacles. He told me he wanted to build a company that balanced profit with purpose. I told him I wanted to finish my degree someday, maybe travel abroad, even if just once. "Then do it," he said simply. "Wanting something for yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human." The night he said that, we were walking by the waterfront. The city lights shimmered across the water, broken by the slow movement of boats. "I feel guilty when I say no," I admitted. "It's like I'm betraying them." Ethan stopped walking and turned toward me. "That's because they trained you to equate love with obedience. But love isn't supposed to cage you, Emma. It's supposed to make you free." His words hit harder than he probably meant them to. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I nodded, blinking back tears. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," he said softly. "They just made you forget." After that night, I started to change in small ways. When Mom called asking if I could send money for a small emergency, I told her I couldn't. She went quiet, clearly waiting for me to backtrack, but I didn't. "Okay," she said finally, her voice clipped. I hung up and sat there for 5 minutes waiting for the guilt to crush me. It didn't. Instead, I felt something strange, peace. When Chloe texted 2 days later asking if I could cover her rent mistake, I typed, "Sorry, not this time," and put the phone away. My hands shook, but my heart didn't. Every no felt like reclaiming a little piece of myself. One evening, Ethan called me out of the blue. "You sound lighter," he said. I laughed. "Do I?" "Yeah, like you're not carrying the world anymore." He paused. "That makes me happy." I looked around my small apartment, the one I'd once hated for being too small, too temporary. "I'm starting to like my life again," I said. Maybe for the first time. There was silence on the line, then his voice soft but sure. "Good. Because you deserve a life that belongs to you." A few weeks later, he came to Charleston for work, and we met at a restaurant by the water. Seeing him in my city felt different, more real. We talked until the place started closing, and as we walked to the parking lot, he reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. "You're quiet," he said. "That's new. I'm just not used to being this seen," I admitted. "You are," he said. "You just forgot how." I wanted to tell him how much that meant, but all I could do was hold his hand tighter. That night when I got home, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Your sister's rent is late again. Can you cover it?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I set the phone down face first on the table and didn't answer. The silence that followed didn't feel heavy like before. It felt deliberate, like choosing air after years of drowning. I stood by the window, the city lights flickering outside, and thought about Ethan's words. Love shouldn't cage you. For so long I'd been conditioned to believe that self-worth came from being needed, but maybe it came from something quieter, from choosing yourself, even when it scared you. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in years, the future didn't look like a tunnel. It looked like an open road. Meeting Ethan's parents felt like stepping into a world I didn't know existed. Their house sat on the edge of Beaufort, framed by oak trees and the faint shimmer of marshland. It was elegant without being cold, warm, light-worn books, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen. Elaine greeted me with a hug so natural it startled me. "We've heard so much about you," she said. Her husband Robert shook my hand and smiled. "Welcome, Emma. Any woman who can keep up with our son's work schedule must be a miracle." Their kindness was disarming. I wasn't used to walking into a home and not feeling like I owed something. Dinner that night was nothing like the ones I grew up with. No passive-aggressive comments, no silence heavy with guilt. Elaine asked about my work about the app Ethan had told her I was developing. She actually listened, nodding, asking questions. Robert talked about his years running a small consulting firm and how they built it together from scratch. Partnership, he said, glancing at his wife, is about respect before anything else. I smiled politely, but something inside me twisted. Respect. It was a word I'd never associated with family before. After dinner, Elaine handed me a cup of tea and said, "You know, Ethan told us you're self-taught. That's impressive. Most people wouldn't have the discipline." My eyes stung. No one in my family had ever said the word impressive about me unless it came with a condition. I mumbled a thank you and looked down at my cup. She touched my hand gently. "We're glad he found someone like you." I didn't realize how much I'd been craving that kind of affirmation until that moment. It wasn't about approval, it was about being seen. Driving home that night, I stared out the window watching the trees blur past. "Your parents are amazing," I said softly. Ethan smiled. "They'll adore you once they really know you." I laughed, half nervous. "Don't say that, you'll jinx it." "No," he said, reaching for my hand. "You just don't realize how easy you are to love." My throat tightened. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love didn't always come with strings. A week later, I decided it was time for him to meet my family. "Are you sure?" he asked gently when I brought it up. "You don't have to rush it." I shook my head. If we're serious about each other, they should know. What I didn't say was that a small part of me hoped seeing him would remind them I'd built something good, something stable. Maybe it would earn their respect. I should have known better. Dinner at my parents' house started awkwardly and stayed that way. Mom barely looked up from the casserole she was serving. "So Ethan," she said, forcing a smile, "I hope you know Emma is very committed to taking care of us. That won't change just because she's dating someone." Ethan blinked, clearly taken aback. "Of course," he said slowly. "Family's important." "It is," Mom replied quickly, "and she's the glue that holds ours together." She said it like a compliment, but it felt like a warning. Chloe arrived late, breezing in with her perfume cloud and loud laugh. "Oh, the famous Ethan," she said, hugging him like they were old friends. Throughout dinner, she dominated the conversation. Her new job, her new apartment, her career trajectory. Every time Ethan tried to ask me something, Chloe cut in. "Oh, Emma's always been the practical one," she said once. "I'm more of the creative type." Mom chuckled. She's right. Emma was born organized. Thank God one of them was. I sat there smiling, nodding, shrinking smaller with every word. After dinner, when we said our goodbyes, Ethan was quiet. He didn't speak until we reached the car. "They don't see you," he said finally. I frowned. "What do you mean, your family? They don't see who you are. They only see what you do for them." I stared out the window. "That's not fair," I said automatically. "They've had a hard life. I'm just helping." "Helping?" he repeated softly. Or being used, his voice wasn't judgmental, but the question landed like a stone. "They need me," I whispered. "What kind of daughter abandons her family?" He turned toward me. "Maybe the kind who's been abandoned for years without realizing it." I didn't answer. I couldn't. His words hit too close. The drive home was silent except for the sound of tires on asphalt. When we reached my apartment, Ethan parked and turned off the engine. "You deserve people who value you for who you are, not just for what you provide." I wanted to believe that. But believing it meant admitting that the people who raised me never had. The following weekend, I had dinner with his parents again. When I mentioned the awkward dinner with my family, Elaine sighed. "Some people don't know how to appreciate a giver until the giving stops." She said it like she'd lived it. Robert nodded. "You can't build respect on guilt." I smiled weakly. It felt strange hearing strangers speak truths my own family never could. Ethan and I started spending more weekends together, cooking, talking, falling into a rhythm that felt natural. For once, I wasn't the caretaker. He noticed when I was tired, cooked when I forgot to eat, made me laugh when the week had worn me down. I'd never known love could feel like rest. I caught myself waiting for the other shoe to drop for him to ask for something to take advantage, but he never did. One evening, he handed me a flyer for a scholarship program at a local university. "You should finish your degree," he said. "It's time." I hesitated. "It's been years." So he said, "That just means you'll appreciate it more." The thought scared me, but it also stirred something hopeful. I'd built my life around survival. The idea of building something for myself felt almost indulgent. But Ethan believed in me enough for both of us. When I told Mom about it over the phone, she didn't sound pleased. "You're going back to school. What about the mortgage? Your father's therapy?" I hesitated. "You and Dad have insurance now. I'll still help when I can." "When you can," she repeated, her tone sharp. "Emma, you can't just abandon us because you're playing student again." The old guilt rose, instantly familiar and suffocating. I hung up, shaking my chest tight. When I told Ethan later, he sighed. "She's scared of losing control. But you don't owe them your life." A week later, I got a card in the mail from Elaine. Inside was a handwritten note. "We're proud of you. Pursue what makes you happy. Love, Mom and Dad, Reed." I stared at it for a long time. Those words, simple, unconditional, were everything I'd wanted to hear from my own parents. I put the card on my nightstand and cried quietly until I fell asleep. Months passed, and my relationship with Ethan deepened. We talked about dreams, about the kind of life we wanted to build. One night, sitting on his porch under a sky full of stars, he said, "You've spent so long giving. Maybe it's time someone gives back." I looked at him, unsure what to say. "I'm not used to that," I admitted. "Then, get used to it," he said, smiling. "You deserve it." For the first time in my life, I believed it might be true, but part of me still waited for my family to understand, to see the person I was becoming. I didn't realize then that they never would. Not until everything came crashing down at my engagement dinner. The engagement dinner was supposed to be a celebration, but from the moment I walked into my parents' house, I knew it wouldn't be. The smell of overcooked roast filled the air, the kind Mom only made when she was anxious. Ethan held my hand as we stepped inside, his smile warm but cautious. "It'll be fine," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. The living room was crowded, neighbors, distant relatives I barely remembered, and of course Chloe in a red dress that screamed for attention. She was holding court in the middle of the room, telling a story loud enough for everyone to hear. When she spotted us, she squealed dramatically. "There they are." The happy couple. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Emma, sweetheart, you should have told me you were wearing that color," she said, eyeing my navy blue dress. "Chloe already picked something similar for next week's charity gala." It wasn't a compliment. I forced a smile. "You look lovely, Mom." Ethan gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, but I could feel the tension in his shoulders. He was already reading the room the way I'd learned to do long ago. Dinner started stiffly. My parents had gone all out: china candles, too many side dishes for a family of 4, and a handful of guests. Dad opened with a toast that felt rehearsed. "To Emma and Ethan," he said, raising his glass. "May your life together be prosperous. And may you never forget where you came from." His eyes lingered on me as he spoke the last line. I smiled weakly, pretending not to notice the subtext. Chloe clinked her glass against mine. "Prosperous," she repeated with a smirk, like the word was a private joke between us. As the night went on, every conversation turned into a performance. Mom bragged about Chloe's recent promotion, then glanced at me as if expecting me to applaud. "She's such a natural leader," she said. "Always has been." Ethan tried to change the subject by complimenting the food, but Mom waved him off. "It's nothing special. I'm sure your mother cooks much better." The table went silent for a beat. Ethan smiled politely. "Actually, she'd say the same thing about you." I saw the flicker of surprise on Mom's face. She wasn't used to being met with kindness she couldn't control. After dessert talk turned to wedding plans. I hadn't even set a date yet, but Mom had already drafted a guest list. "We'll need to reserve the country club," she said, flipping through her notebook. "It's where respectable families hold weddings. We don't want people talking." I frowned. "Mom, I was thinking something smaller. Maybe a garden ceremony, just close friends." Her smile vanished. "Emma, your sister's friends are expecting an event. She's already been planning your bachelorette party." I blinked. I didn't ask her to. "She's just excited," Mom said. "Let her shine a little." Ethan's fork clattered softly against his plate. "It's Emma's wedding," he said, calm but firm. "Shouldn't it be what she wants?" Dad gave him a look that could have curdled milk. "Of course," he said. "But family comes first. You'll learn that soon enough." I tried to smooth things over. "Let's not argue. We're just brainstorming." But I could feel Ethan's frustration simmering beside me. When Mom brought out the ring box to admire again, she couldn't resist a jab. "It's very modest," she said, peering at the sapphire. "I just thought someone in your position, Ethan, might choose something more substantial." "I prefer meaningful to flashy," Ethan replied easily. "The stone suits her perfectly." I reached under the table and squeezed his hand in thanks. Mom didn't reply. She just poured herself another glass of wine and muttered, "Of course." Chloe leaned in with a sugary smile. "You know I can help with your dress, Em. I have better connections at the boutique downtown. You'll want something that photographs well." "I already found one," I said. "Oh," she tilted her head. "Is it at least designer? You don't want to look out of place." I bit back the urge to laugh. "I'll be fine." "Suit yourself," she said, but her tone was smug, like she'd won something invisible. Later, while I was helping clear the table, I overheard Mom whispering to Chloe in the kitchen. "If Emma insists on keeping things small, we'll have to step in. It's embarrassing enough that she picked such a simple ring." "Don't worry," Chloe said. "I'll handle her." The words hit like ice water. I stepped back before they could see me and forced a smile as I rejoined the group. Ethan caught my eye and frowned silently, asking what was wrong. I shook my head. "Not here." After everyone left, we sat in the car for a long time, the silence thick. "They're going to try to take over your wedding," Ethan said finally. I looked out the window. "They're just excited." "No," he said. "They're controlling you. There's a difference." His voice wasn't angry, just tired. I wanted to argue, but the truth was too obvious. He turned toward me. "You don't owe them a performance. You owe yourself peace." I exhaled slowly, the word peace ringing in my ears. "I'll set boundaries," I said. "I can handle them." He smiled sadly. "You shouldn't have to handle your own family like a problem to solve." The following weeks were a blur of phone calls and compromises. Mom vetoed every venue I suggested. Too small, too trendy, too cheap. Chloe insisted on being maid of honor, though I'd planned to ask Jennifer from work. "You can't choose a coworker over your sister," Mom said when I protested. "People would talk." I gave in. When I mentioned a modest guest list, she laughed. 50 people, Emma. That's not a wedding, it's a luncheon." The list grew to over 100, filled with names I didn't recognize. "Networking is important," Dad said. "You never know who might help Ethan's business." Each conversation left me drained. Ethan noticed. "You don't sound like yourself anymore," he said one night over dinner. "You sound like them." I dropped my fork. "I just want to keep the peace." "At what cost?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when my wedding had stopped being about love and started being about survival. Chloe called the next day with her latest idea. "We need something Instagram-worthy," she said. "What about a chocolate fountain or a 3-tier floral cake?" "I want something simple," I said. "Vanilla with raspberry filling." She groaned. "Emma, this isn't about what you like. It's about the memory you're creating for everyone." I laughed bitterly. "It's my wedding, not a brand campaign." "You're being defensive," she said. "I'm just trying to help you not embarrass yourself." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. I sat there for a long time staring at the wall, realizing that no matter how much I gave it would never be enough. 2 days later, I met Jennifer for coffee. "You don't look like a bride-to-be," she said. "You look like you're preparing for war." I smiled faintly. "That's about right." "Then maybe it's time you stopped fighting for people who only see you as a resource," she said. "Start fighting for yourself." Her words stayed with me the whole drive home. I wanted to believe I could do that, to stand up for myself and not feel guilty afterward. When I got home, Ethan was waiting on the porch. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though my throat ached. He took my hands. "Emma, I need you to hear this. You don't need their approval to start your life. You already earned your freedom." I swallowed hard. "Then why does it still feel like I owe them everything?" "Because they raised you to believe you did," he said quietly. "But you don't. Not anymore." That night, I wrote a list in my notebook. Small ceremony. My dress. Jennifer as maid of honor. 50 guests max. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A declaration, however fragile, that I was done letting them dictate my happiness. As I closed the notebook, I whispered to myself, "This time it's mine." I didn't know then that every decision on that list would become another battle, another line I'd have to defend. But for the first time in years, I felt something new blooming inside me: resolve. The wedding planning became a war disguised as a family project. Every time I thought I'd made progress, another battle began. It started small: color palettes, flower arrangements, things that shouldn't matter enough to break someone down. But with my family, everything was a power struggle wrapped in the language of love. "We just want what's best for you," Mom said, as if those words excused every demand, every manipulation. By the 3rd month, I barely recognized my own wedding anymore. The first fight was about the venue. Ethan and I had found a restored barn on the outskirts of Charleston, surrounded by oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. It was quiet, natural, exactly what we wanted. When I told Mom, she laughed like I'd made a joke. "A barn, Emma. This isn't a country fair. It's elegant," I said, showing her photos. "Rustic elegance. People get married there all the time. People without reputations to protect," she replied. "You're marrying into a professional family now. What will they think?" I opened my mouth to argue, but Dad chimed in. "Your mother's right. The country club is more appropriate." Appropriate. That word always came with chains. By the end of the call, I'd agreed to consider their suggestion, even though it meant quadrupling our budget. Ethan tried to talk me out of it, but guilt had already won. Next came the guest list. We'd agreed on 50 just close family and friends. Somehow, by the next week, it had grown to over 100 names. "Who are these people?" I asked, flipping through the spreadsheet Mom sent. Dad's old boss, Mom's bridge partners, Chloe's co-worker's mom, sounded offended. "They've known you since you were little." "I don't even remember them," I said. "They remember you," she shot back. "And besides, it's networking. You never know who might help Ethan's business." When I told Ethan, he nearly dropped his coffee. "They're turning our wedding into a corporate luncheon," he said. "Let them invite whoever they want," I said weakly. "If it keeps the peace." He looked at me for a long time before replying, "Emma, peace isn't supposed to cost you everything you want." The worst part wasn't their interference. It was how natural it all felt. Every guilt trip landed on familiar ground. I'd spent a decade training to surrender gracefully. When Mom cried because I didn't like her centerpiece idea, I apologized. When Chloe accused me of being controlling after I suggested she tone down her maid of honor duties, I backed down. "You're just stressed," she said, patting my shoulder like she was doing me a favor. "That's why you're being difficult." I believed her for longer than I'd like to admit. One afternoon, while I was finalizing the catering details, Chloe burst into my apartment uninvited. "We need to talk about the cake," she announced, tossing her sunglasses on the counter. "We already picked one," I said. "Vanilla with raspberry filling." "Boring," she replied. "I found this bakery that does 5-tier showpieces. They'll even put gold leaf on it." "We don't need 5 tiers," I said. "There are only over 100 guests," she cut in. And think about the photos. You want something Instagram-worthy. The word made me flinch. I don't care about Instagram. She gave me a pitying look. You really don't get how this works, do you? People remember the image? I folded my arms. I'm not throwing a performance, Chloe. It's a wedding. She smiled sweetly. Same thing if you do it right. Later that night, I told Ethan what happened. He was quiet for a long time before saying, "This isn't about a cake, is it?" "No," I said. "It's about control." He sighed. "Then maybe it's time you take it back." I wanted to so badly. But every time I tried, I heard Mom's voice in my head, "Don't make everything about yourself." Years of conditioning whispered that rebellion meant selfishness, and selfishness meant losing love. The next confrontation came over the maid of honor. I'd chosen Jennifer, my best friend, and the one person who'd seen me through everything. When Mom found out, she called immediately. "Your sister's feelings are hurt," she said. "You made her look bad." Mom Chloe's been criticizing everything I do. I don't think she even wants to help. She's just protective, Mom said. And blood comes first. Always. The word always settled like a stone in my stomach. By the end of the call, I'd agreed to make Chloe co-maid of honor. She took it as a victory. "See," she said later, "I told you it'd work out. You just have to trust me." Every compromise chipped away at the joy I'd once felt. I stopped looking forward to the wedding emails, the planning sessions, even the fittings. The excitement was gone, replaced by dread. Ethan noticed. "You don't smile when you talk about it anymore," he said one night while we were cooking dinner. I stirred the pasta just to avoid looking at him. "Because it's not really ours," I said quietly. He put down the knife. "Then, let's take it back. Tell me what you want." I hesitated. "I want a day that feels like us." "Then that's what we'll have," he said. His confidence should have comforted me, but instead it scared me. Because deep down I knew the storm wasn't over. A week later, Mom called to tell me she'd already booked the country club. What I said. You hadn't confirmed the other venue, so I went ahead. They only had one date left. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. "You had no right." "I'm your mother," she snapped. "If I didn't take charge, you'd regret it later." My chest tightened. "It's my wedding, Mom. And it's our family's reputation," she said. "Don't forget who made it possible for you to get here." I hung up before she could say more, shaking so badly. I dropped my phone. That night I cried for the first time in months. Not because I was sad, but because I was angry, and I didn't know how to stop apologizing for it. Ethan held me until I stopped shaking. "You can't keep letting them steal your joy," he said. "Then tell me how to stop." "By remembering you have a choice," he said simply. "You always did." But choices came with consequences. When I didn't call Mom back, she sent Chloe to check on me. My sister showed up the next morning with coffee and a pitying smile. "You're overreacting," she said, handing me the cup. "Mom just wants the best for you." "No," I said quietly. "She wants control." Chloe laughed. "You sound just like Ethan. He's putting ideas in your head." "They're my ideas," I said. For once, her smile vanished. "You're not seriously going to start a fight before your wedding, are you? Think about how that'll look." There it was again, the image. Always the image. I realized then that Chloe didn't see me as a person anymore, just as a character in the family story she'd built around herself. 2 days later, Mom emailed me the revised seating chart. She'd moved Ethan's parents from the front table to the second row to make room for family. I called her immediately. "You can't do that," I said. "Robert and Elaine are hosting part of the reception." "They won't mind," she said. "They're polite people. So am I snapped. But I'm done being quiet. The silence on the other end was sharp enough to cut through the line. "Excuse me, you heard me," I said, surprising even myself. "Stop changing things without asking me," she inhaled sharply. "You're being disrespectful." "No, I'm setting a boundary." "Boundaries," she repeated as if tasting something sour. "We didn't raise you to talk to us like that." "No," I said, my voice steady now. "You raised me to never talk at all." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said coldly, "You'll regret this." Maybe I said, "But at least it'll be mine to regret." When I hung up, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Ethan came in from the kitchen, concern etched on his face. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "I think so." It wasn't relief I felt, not yet. It was something heavier, but truer, a shift deep inside me. For the first time, I'd chosen myself, even if it meant breaking something I'd spent my whole life trying to hold together. That night, I walked to the window and looked out at the dark city skyline. The reflection staring back wasn't the girl who always said yes. It was someone else, someone tired, someone brave. Someone learning that sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about finally letting go. The bridal boutique smelled like jasmine and expensive fabric softener. Soft light filtered through the tall windows, catching the edge of my dress as I turned in front of the mirror. For the first time in months, I felt beautiful. The satin hugged me in the right places, the neckline simple and timeless. "It's perfect," the seamstress said with a smile. I nodded, barely recognizing the woman in the reflection, calm, radiant, not the tired version of myself who had spent weeks defending every choice. For a brief moment, I believed the chaos might finally be behind me. Then the door opened, and the sound of heels echoed against the marble floor. Chloe's voice sliced through the quiet. "Sorry, I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." She walked in holding a latte and wearing sunglasses like she was attending a fashion shoot instead of my fitting. Her eyes flicked over me, slow and assessing. "So," she said, setting her coffee down, "that's the dress?" The seamstress smiled politely. "Isn't it lovely?" Chloe tilted her head. "It's safe." I turned toward her. "Safe?" She shrugged, sipping her drink. "I mean, it's very you. Practical. Conservative. But this is your wedding day, Emma. Shouldn't you make more of a statement?" "I don't want a statement," I said evenly. "I want something timeless." Chloe smirked. "Timeless or boring? There's a difference." The seamstress glanced nervously between us. I forced a smile. "I like it." "Of course you do," Chloe said. "But Em, you're marrying into a successful family now. You need to look successful. Image matters." There it was again, the word that had ruled Chloe's life since college. Image. She'd built an entire identity around it while I'd been building theirs. I turned back to the mirror, pretending her words didn't sting. "I'm not trying to impress anyone." "Well, you should be," she said lightly. "Everyone will be comparing you to Ethan's exes, to his colleagues' wives. You don't want to embarrass yourself." Something in me flickered. "I think I'll survive," I said. Her eyes met mine in the mirror. "You always say that, but you never think long term." Before I could respond, the seamstress returned with a set of pins, and Chloe stepped aside with exaggerated patience. "Don't mind me," she said, scrolling on her phone. "I'm just here for moral support." Except her version of support felt more like sabotage. Every few minutes she made another suggestion. Maybe a flashier neckline. Maybe rhinestones. "You need sparkle, Em. You're too understated." Each word chipped at my confidence until all I could see was what was missing. When she finally left, I stood alone in the quiet room. The seamstress adjusted the hem while I stared at my reflection, my throat tight. For months, I'd fought to keep control of this wedding, but somehow even my dress had become another battlefield. "You look lovely," the seamstress said softly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. At home, the silence felt heavier than usual. I hung the dress carefully in the closet, then sat on the bed and stared at it. I should have felt joy, excitement, something. Instead, I felt hollow. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Chloe said your dress looked a bit plain." Maybe she's right. You'll want to fit in with Ethan's family. The words blurred. I set the phone down and pressed my palms to my eyes. Fit in. I'd spent my whole life fitting into spaces that didn't want me, and still it was never enough. That night I called Ethan. "What if I'm not enough for your family?" I said, before I could stop myself. He paused. "Where is this coming from? Chloe thinks I should pick another dress. Something more pretentious," he offered gently. I let out a shaky laugh. She said, "I'll embarrass myself." "Emma." His voice softened. "Do you love your dress?" "Yes." "Do you feel beautiful in it?" "I did," I said quietly. "Until today. Then that's all that matters. But what if they think I look—" "No what ifs," he said. "They're marrying you, not your wardrobe. And for the record, my mother thinks you're the most genuine person she's ever met." She couldn't care less about a dress. I smiled, tears pressing against the back of my eyes. "You always know what to say." "I just know the truth," he said. "You're more than enough, Emma. You always have been." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. My own voice echoed in my head. I did feel beautiful until today. How many times had I let them take something good and twist it into doubt? Sleep didn't come easily that night. My mind drifted back to childhood, to another moment that looked innocent but left a scar. I was 10, standing beside Chloe at a school art fair. We'd both entered paintings, mine of a river, hers of a sunset. Mine won first place. Mom hugged me, smiling, but a second later she said, "Chloe's drawing has more personality, though. You're just very precise." I didn't understand then that it wasn't a compliment. That was the first time I learned being careful was a flaw in our family. Chloe got to be the dreamer. I was the safety net. Even my victories had fine print. The memory left a dull ache in my chest. Maybe that's why her words about the dress hurt so much. It wasn't just criticism. It was history repeating itself. The next morning I went back to the boutique before work. The seamstress looked surprised to see me. "Forgot something, just needed a minute," I said. I walked over to the mirror and unzipped the garment bag. The dress shimmered softly as I pulled it out. When I stepped into it again, everything else faded. The doubts, the noise, the expectations. I looked at myself and thought of the girl who'd paid her family's mortgage at 20, who'd worked nights to buy her sister textbooks, who'd built a life out of exhaustion and still managed to stand tall. She was still here. She always had been. "They don't get to define what beautiful means for me," I whispered. The seamstress smiled, though she hadn't heard me. "Shall I add the final touches? Keep it exactly as it is," I said. "It's perfect." On my way out, I texted Ethan a photo. He replied almost instantly, "Your confidence is the most beautiful thing you wear." I stopped in the parking lot, reading it twice. Confidence? I wasn't sure I'd ever truly had it, not the kind that came from within, unshaken by approval or comparison. But maybe it was something you rebuilt piece by piece like muscle after injury. That evening I stood in front of the mirror again. No dress this time, just jeans and a sweater. I practiced saying it out loud, "I am enough." It sounded fragile at first, but stronger the second time. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again. "Chloe, so did you rethink the dress? I can still get you a discount with my designer friend." I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back, "No. I love my dress. And I don't need your help." I hit send before I could lose my nerve. There was no immediate reply, just silence. But this silence felt different, not empty, not fearful. It was peace. That night I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, scrolling through wedding photos online. Every smiling bride looked perfect. But what caught my attention wasn't the dresses, it was the light in their eyes. That's what I wanted. Not perfection, not approval, just light. As I turned off my phone, I thought of Chloe's words, "You'll want to look like you belong." I smiled to myself. I already did. Not in their world, but in mine. If only I'd known then that they were just getting started. Because the next battle wouldn't be about fabric or flowers, it would be about something far more valuable. The day I finally stood my ground, I would do it wearing that very dress. The morning of my wedding dawned soft and golden, the kind of day poets wrote about. The ocean breeze slipped through the balcony doors of our suite, carrying the scent of salt and flowers. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Ethan had left early to handle some last-minute details with his parents, and I sat by the window in my silk robe, sipping coffee, watching the horizon blush with sunrise. "It's finally here," I whispered to myself. After all the chaos, all the fights and compromises today would be about love. About us. I was halfway through having my hair done when my phone rang. Mom flashed across the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Emma, we have a problem, Mom said, breathless, her voice already urgent. My stomach tightened. What kind of problem? Your father's suit doesn't fit. The pants are too long and the jacket's too tight. He can't possibly walk you down the aisle looking like that. I closed my eyes. Mom, we had fittings 2 months ago. Why is this happening now? She huffed. Do you want me to ruin your pictures? Chloe found someone who can fix it this morning, but they need $300 in cash. None of us have that kind of money on hand. Of course they didn't. Mom, I don't have time to please Emma. Don't make a scene. Your father's embarrassed enough as it is. We'll pay you back. The lie stung more because I knew she believed it when she said it. Fine, I said, exhaling. I'll handle it. Jennifer, my maid of honor, gave me a look as I hung up. What now, Taylor? Emergency, I muttered. Can you run to the ATM for me? 300 cash? She stared at me. You're kidding. On your wedding day, I know. Please. An hour later, Jennifer came back, her face grim. I dropped the money off at your parents' hotel, she said. But your sister wasn't there. She was at the nail salon. I blinked. What? She waved at me through the window. Perfectly fine. No Taylor in sight. It took me a second to understand. They lied. Yeah, Jennifer said softly. They did. Something inside me went very still. On my wedding day, I whispered. Jennifer put a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to deal with this now. Yes, I said. I do. By the time I arrived at the venue, my smile was armor. Guests were already finding their seats beneath the floral arch, the sea glittering in the background. Ethan's mother hugged me when she saw me. You look radiant, darling. How are you feeling? Perfect, I lied. The ceremony went by in a blur. The music, the vows, the way Ethan's eyes locked on mine as if we were the only two people in the world. For a few sacred minutes, everything felt pure, real. When we said, I do, the crowd cheered, and I believed for a moment that love really could wash away years of damage. At the reception, laughter filled the air. The scent of roses and champagne mingled with the ocean breeze. Then, Ethan's parents stood to make a toast. Emma, Robert said, lifting his glass, from the moment we met you, we knew you were special. You've been like a daughter to us. We wanted to give you something that represents a fresh start. Elaine held out a small velvet box. Inside was a silver key fob with the BMW logo gleaming under the lights. It's parked out front, she said through tears. A wedding gift. So, you'll never have to take the bus again. The room erupted in applause. My heart swelled. I'd spent 10 years taking 3 buses to work, saving every penny, and now freedom. Thank you, I whispered, hugging them both. You have no idea what this means to me. I was still holding the key when Mom appeared beside me, her expression tight but composed. Emma, we need to talk, she said softly. Privately. A chill ran through me. Now yes, it's important. She guided me toward a quiet corner near the dessert table. Dad joined us a moment later, adjusting his tie. Mom started with a smile too sweet to be genuine. That was such a lovely gesture from Ethan's parents. Yes, I said carefully. They're very generous. The thing is, Dad said, clearing his throat, Chloe's starting her new job downtown next week. You know how unreliable public transit can be. My chest tightened. What are you asking? Mom clasped her hands like she was delivering a sermon. We think it would be wonderful if you gave her the car. She deserves a good start. You have Ethan to take care of you now. I stared at her. You can't be serious. Don't be selfish, Dad said quietly. She's worked hard. She needs it more than you. There it was, the sentence I'd heard in one form or another my entire life. She deserves it more than you. I felt the words land like a physical blow. After everything I've done for this family, I said, my voice shaking. After all the years Mom interrupted, her tone sharp. You wouldn't even have your degree if we hadn't supported you emotionally through those years. Emotionally, I almost laughed. You mean the years I paid your bills while you pretended nothing was wrong? Watch your tone, Dad said. This isn't a fight. No, I said, straightening. It's not. Because I'm not giving her the car. Before either of them could respond, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Ethan. His expression was calm, but his jaw was tight. Sorry to interrupt, he said smoothly. They're about to cut the cake. I need my wife. He led me away without another word. I could feel my mother's glare burning into my back. When we were far enough from the crowd, Ethan turned to me. How much did they ask for? They didn't ask, I said, trembling. They told me. They want me to give Chloe the car. He stared at me for a long moment, disbelief flashing in his eyes. Emma, look at me. Do you want to give her the car? No. The answer came out before I even thought about it. Then don't. They'll say, I'm selfish. Let them, he said firmly. You've spent your whole life giving until there's nothing left. This time you get to keep what's yours. Something in me shifted then, a quiet, solid clarity. I nodded. Okay. We walked back hand in hand, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses growing louder. When it was time for the bouquet toss, Mom appeared again, her smile brittle. Have you thought about what we discussed? Yes, I said. And the answer is no. Her expression froze. Excuse me, I'm keeping the car. Her face flushed crimson. You can't mean that. We already told Chloe. Then you shouldn't have made promises about something that wasn't yours to give. The DJ's voice cut through the tension. All right, everyone. Time for the bouquet. I turned away before she could respond, walking toward the dance floor where Jennifer and my bridesmaids waited, cheering. I tossed the bouquet into the crowd. Jennifer caught it and laughed, holding it high. For the first time that night, I felt light. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mom whispering furiously to Dad, Chloe beside them, her face twisted in disbelief. It didn't matter. I'd said no and the world hadn't ended. Later, when the guests began to leave, Chloe approached me near the exit. Mom told me you're being difficult, she said, arms crossed. You don't even need that car. You live 5 minutes from work. I looked at her calmly, and yet I earned it. She blinked. I need it more than you. You've needed a lot of things, I said quietly. Maybe it's time you start earning them. Her jaw tightened. What happened to you? I stopped confusing love with sacrifice. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But at least it'll be mine to regret. As Ethan and I drove away that night, the BMW purred beneath us, smooth and steady. I looked out the window and saw the reflection of my wedding dress in the glass. Strong, defiant, no longer just pretty fabric, but armor. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their daughter or their provider. I felt like myself. And though I didn't know what the fallout would be, one thing was certain. The old version of me, the one who never said no, had finally left that reception hall for good. The waves crashed softly against the shore outside our honeymoon villa in Costa Rica, and for the first time in years, the world was quiet. No buzzing phone, no emergencies, no one needing me to fix something. Just the sound of the ocean and the warmth of Ethan's hand in mine. You look lighter, he said one evening, as we watched the sunset turn the sky to molten gold. I smiled, half asleep from the peace that had settled over me. Maybe I finally am. We spent the week hiking through rainforests, drinking coffee so strong it could wake the dead and falling asleep to the hum of cicadas. It felt like stepping into someone else's life, one where my worth wasn't measured by how useful I could be. I didn't realize how much noise I'd been living with until it was gone. For 7 days, nobody asked for money. Nobody guilted me. Nobody said I was selfish. I could breathe again. But peace, I learned, has an expiration date. When we got home, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 17 missed calls from Mom, 12 from Chloe, and a wall of text messages so long I had to scroll. Call me immediately. You've embarrassed this family. Your sister is heartbroken. I hope you're happy. Michael is turning you against us. They couldn't even get my husband's name right. I set the phone down, hands trembling, and let out a long, shaky laugh. They didn't even wait a week, I said. Ethan walked over, reading over my shoulder. His jaw tightened. They're not calling to talk. They're calling to pull you back in. I know, I said softly, but part of me still wants to fix it. He leaned against the counter studying me. You've spent your whole life fixing things that weren't yours to fix. Maybe this time you just don't. So I didn't. For the first time, I ignored the calls. I unpacked, watered the plants, and spent an entire afternoon doing absolutely nothing. The silence that followed was unnerving at first, like standing in a room where someone had just shouted and left. But the longer it lasted, the calmer I felt. Every hour I didn't call them back was like reclaiming a small piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. By the third day, the messages stopped. I thought maybe they'd finally given up. I should have known better. That evening, my phone rang again. Mom. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Ethan looked up from chopping vegetables. Your choice, he said. I picked up. Hello, Mom. Don't you hello, Mom, me, she snapped. Do you have any idea what you've done? I kept my voice steady. What exactly have I done? Your sister had to take 2 buses and walk 4 blocks to work on her first day. In heels. Because of you, she almost cried. Emma, how could you do this to her? For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. Mom, she's 26. She can figure it out. You've changed, she said, her voice trembling with anger. You never used to be so cold. I took a deep breath. You're right. I have changed. I stopped mistaking guilt for love. Excuse me, I've been supporting this family since I was 19, Mom. I paid for Chloe's tuition, her apartment, her everything, and not once did anyone ask how I was doing. You all just assumed I'd keep giving. That's what family does, she said quickly. No, I said. That's what I did, and you took advantage of it. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp. You sound just like him. Like who, Ethan? He's turned you into someone I don't even recognize. I smiled bitterly. No, Mom. He just reminded me that I was allowed to exist. She scoffed. You'll regret this, Emma. Family is forever. Then maybe forever needs a break, I said, and hung up. The moment I set the phone down, I expected panic, guilt, something. Instead, I felt relief, pure and startling. Over the next few weeks, I built a new kind of rhythm. Work, dinner, quiet evenings with Ethan. We took long walks, cooked together, and talked about everything except my family. I told Jennifer about it over lunch one day. You haven't called them once, she asked, eyebrows raised. Nope, I said, stirring my coffee. And it's nice, she grinned. You're detoxing from emotional manipulation. Withdrawal hurts at first, but trust me, it's worth it. I laughed. I don't think they'll ever understand. They don't have to, she said. You just have to keep your peace. But peace again didn't last long. One afternoon, while working from home, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Chloe stood there, arms crossed, wearing oversized sunglasses and an expression that could curdle milk. We need to talk, she said. I hesitated. Come in. She stepped inside, her perfume, filling the room like a warning. So you're really keeping the car? Yes. Her jaw tightened. Do you have any idea what my life's been like these past 3 weeks? I've been humiliated. Taking the bus like some intern, I folded my arms. You are an intern, Chloe, she glared. That's not the point. You're married now. You don't even need the car. Ethan has one. I need it because it's mine, I said calmly. You're being selfish. I almost laughed. Selfish. After everything I've done for you, she flinched but recovered quickly. You've always loved acting like a martyr. Maybe you enjoy making me look bad. That's not what this is, I said, voice steady now. This is about boundaries. Something you've never respected. Her eyes flashed. Dad's been thinking about taking side jobs again to help me buy a car. His back can't handle it, but he's willing to because he actually cares. I can't believe you don't. I stared at her, incredulous. You're blaming me because Dad wants to make another bad decision, because you forced him to. She shot back. For a second I saw the girl she'd been spoiled, untouchable, terrified of accountability. And I realized she might never grow up because no one had ever made her. Chloe, I said quietly, you've spent your whole life thinking love means other people fixing your mistakes. It doesn't. She went silent, lips trembling. Then she laughed bitterly. Wow, he really did change you. Ethan didn't change me, I said. He just reminded me I was worth changing for. Her expression faltered. She grabbed her purse, her voice shaking. Mom was right. You're not the same person anymore. No, I said softly. I'm not. She turned and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut, and I exhaled slowly. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful this time. It was heavy, but it was mine. That night, Ethan found me sitting by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. Rough day, he asked, kneeling beside me. Chloe came by, he sighed. Let me guess, another guilt trip, something like that. I smiled faintly, but I think I handled it. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. I'm proud of you. Why? Because you finally stopped letting them write your story. I looked at him for a long moment, then leaned into his chest. It's strange, I murmured. It's so quiet now. I don't know what to do with it. Enjoy it, he whispered. You earned it. That night, as I drifted to sleep, I thought about how different silence could sound. For years it had been punishment, the cold shoulder, the silent treatment, the reminder that I'd failed someone's expectations. Now, it was something else. A shield, a sanctuary. They taught me that silence was shame. But this silence filled with peace felt like revenge. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the call came. Dad's voice, warm but hesitant, crackled through the line. Emma, we're having a small dinner for my birthday next week. Just the family. It would mean a lot if you came. I hesitated. It had been 6 months since the wedding and the fallout that followed. 6 months of silence broken only by the occasional passive-aggressive text from Mom or the accidental encounter with Chloe on social media. Part of me wanted to say no to protect the peace I'd fought so hard for. But another part, the one still craving connection, whispered that maybe things could finally be civil. Okay, I said quietly. We'll be there. Ethan looked up from his laptop when I told him. You sure? He asked gently. You don't owe them anything. I know, I said. But it's Dad's birthday. I just want to see if it can be different. He didn't argue. He just nodded, squeezing my hand. Then we'll go. Together. The night of the dinner I dressed, simply cream blouse, navy skirt, nothing that screamed look at me. I didn't want this to feel like a confrontation. Ethan drove while I stared out the window, rehearsing polite conversation in my head. When we pulled up to the restaurant, I spotted them through the window. Mom arranging silverware, Chloe already talking animatedly to someone I didn't recognize. Deep breaths, Ethan said, softly parking the car. Inside, the air smelled of basil and wine. Emma's dad stood to hug me. He looked older, tired, but happy to see me. For a brief moment, I felt like a kid again. Happy birthday, Dad, I said, handing him a small wrapped box. Nothing big, just something for your garden. He smiled genuinely. You remembered. Saturday. The table was set for 7. Ethan and I took seats across from my parents. The empty chair beside Chloe made me uneasy. Is someone else coming? I asked lightly. Chloe grinned. My boyfriend Trevor. He's just parking the car. Of course she had a new boyfriend. And of course he'd be at a family dinner that was supposed to be just family. I took a slow sip of water. To my surprise, the first hour went smoothly. Mom was polite, even friendly. Dad asked about my work, genuinely interested. I found myself laughing at one of his jokes the way I used to before everything became a transaction. When Trevor finally arrived, a tall man in an expensive suit, he shook Ethan's hand firmly and introduced himself. Finance, he said almost immediately. Chloe tells me you work in tech. Ethan nodded, smiling. Consulting for green startups. Interesting, Trevor said, glancing at his Rolex. So you two are kind of opposites, huh? One saves the planet, the other saves money. Chloe laughed like he'd said something clever. I forced a polite smile, but Ethan caught my eye amused. Guess so, he said easily. Dinner was served, pasta, wine, soft conversation. For a while it almost felt normal. But normal never lasted long in my family. So Chloe said, cutting into her food, "How's the BMW?" I froze mid-bite. Her tone was too casual. "It's great," I said after a pause. "Drives beautifully," she smirked. "Must be nice." I had to sell my old car after the engine died. Taking the bus has been humbling. Mom sighed dramatically. "We told her you might help, but she said not to expect miracles." Ethan's fork clinked against his plate. "Maybe because she's not a miracle worker," he said evenly. The table went quiet. Mom recovered first, forcing a laugh. "We're just joking. No need to be defensive." Ethan smiled thinly. "Not defensive, just factual." Chloe rolled her eyes. "You don't have to protect her, Ethan. She's perfectly capable of taking care of herself. Always has been. That's the problem." My chest tightened. "What's that supposed to mean? You act like the world owes you for being responsible," Chloe said, her voice rising slightly. "But no one asked you to play savior." Dad cleared his throat. "All right, let's not." "No, let her talk," Ethan said quietly. "I'd like to hear this." Chloe leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with the same defiance I used to admire when we were kids. "You think you're better than us because you finally said no, because you have a husband who stands up for you. Newsflash, Emma. You didn't sacrifice out of love. You did it to feel superior." The words hit me like a slap. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I looked to Mom for support, but she was silent, staring at her plate. Ethan reached for my hand under the table, grounding me. "That's not true," he said softly but firmly. "She supported all of you because you needed her. Because she loved you. And instead of gratitude, you gave her guilt." Dad slammed his fork down. "You don't get to talk to us that way." Ethan met his gaze evenly. "Maybe someone should." Mom gasped. "How dare you?" "No," Ethan said, raising his voice slightly. "How dare you? You've taken from her for years, and when she finally asked for something for herself, you called her selfish." The air in the room thickened, heavy and electric. Chloe's face flushed red. "You don't know anything about this family." "I know enough," Ethan said. "I know that every story Emma's ever told me ends the same way, her giving and you taking." "Stop," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Please." He turned to me, eyes softening instantly. "You don't have to protect them anymore." I stood up, heart pounding. He's right. Everyone looked at me. "I'm done pretending this is normal," I said, my voice shaking. "I paid for your bills, Chloe's tuition, Dad's therapy, Mom's medication, because I wanted to help. Not because I had to. But it was never enough, was it? You called me reliable, practical, strong. All those words that sound like compliments but really mean useful." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Emma, that's not fair." "No, what's not fair is being told I don't deserve my own wedding gift because Chloe needs it more. What's not fair is spending a decade trying to prove I'm worth something beyond what I can provide." Dad pushed his chair back, his voice rising. "We raised you better than this, did you?" I asked softly. "Because all you taught me was that love meant sacrifice and silence meant respect." For a moment no one spoke. Even the hum of the restaurant faded into nothing. Then Chloe stood up, shaking. "You're unbelievable." She turned to Trevor, grabbing her purse. "Let's go," Chloe, Dad said warningly, but she was already walking out. Mom stood too, but I held up a hand. "Don't." My voice was steady, now clear. "If you want to have a relationship with me, it has to be built on respect, not guilt." "Respect," Mom repeated. "After everything we've done for you, yes," I said. "Because respect isn't earned by taking, it's earned by listening." Ethan stood and took my hand. "We're leaving." As we walked toward the door, I heard Dad's voice, softer this time. "Don't let him turn you against us." I turned back, meeting his eyes. "You did that all by yourselves." Outside the air was cool and clean, a relief after the heavy heat inside. Ethan opened the car door, and for a long moment we just sat in silence. "How do you feel?" he asked finally. I looked out the window at the reflections of the streetlights on the wet pavement. "Free," I said, surprising myself with how true it sounded. "For the first time, I think I'm really free." He reached over, lacing his fingers through mine. "Then it was worth it." I nodded, watching the restaurant fade behind us as we drove away. The past was still there, sitting at that table, angry and unfinished. But I wasn't. I was moving forward 1 mile at a time, leaving the weight of their expectations behind. ChatGPT Denoy. 2 years have passed since that night at the restaurant, and sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear my phone buzzing with a new demand, a new emergency. But it's quiet now. My mornings begin with sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, the smell of coffee, and Ethan humming off-key while feeding our dog. Peace used to feel foreign, almost uncomfortable, like silence after a storm. Now it feels like home. I never imagined a life this simple could make me feel so whole. We bought a small house on the edge of town, a white cottage, with a garden that overflows every spring. I planted roses by the front gate, the same kind that bloomed near the wedding venue, only these belong to me. On weekends I tend to them with muddy hands and a clean heart. No more racing to fix someone else's disaster. No more apologizing for wanting rest. After the wedding fallout, I thought the guilt would swallow me. But the longer I lived in the quiet, the more I realized how much of my identity had been built around their chaos. Without it, I could finally see who I was. I went back to school, taking night classes after work, chasing the degree I'd given up a decade earlier. When I walked across that stage with my diploma, Ethan was in the front row, clapping louder than anyone. His parents threw me a graduation party complete with a banner that said, "You did it, Emma." It was small and imperfect and beautiful. Sometimes I still think about the old version of myself, the girl who said yes to everything, who mistook exhaustion for love. I don't hate her. She did what she thought she had to. But I wish I could tell her that sacrifice without appreciation isn't noble, it's self-erasure. 6 months after graduation, the phone rang again. It was Dad. I almost didn't answer, but something in my chest told me to. His voice was softer than I remembered. "Emma," he said, "I owe you an apology." For a moment I couldn't speak. "You don't have to, I do," he interrupted gently. "I've been thinking about everything you said that night, about how we treated you. And you were right." I sank into the couch, tears welling up. "Your mother and we got so used to you solving everything that we forgot you weren't supposed to be our safety net. You were supposed to be our daughter." The words hit harder than any accusation ever had. "Dad," he sighed. "We didn't mean to make you feel small, but we did. And I'm sorry, truly. It wasn't perfect. It didn't undo the years of imbalance, but it was real." And for the first time, I heard his voice without the weight of obligation pressing on my chest. A month later, we met for lunch at a small cafe downtown. Mom was there too. Her hair had gone grayer, her posture less sharp. She smiled awkwardly when she saw me. "You look good," she said. "Happier." "I am," I said honestly. The conversation was clumsy at first, filled with small talk and long pauses. But then Mom reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. "I was hard on you," she said quietly. "I didn't realize how much I resented your strength. I thought if I kept you close I could control you. But I was just afraid of losing you. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words, it just needs time." When we left, she hugged me. Not the quick, obligatory kind, but something longer. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," she whispered. "I just hope they can be better." "They already are," I said. Chloe's apology came later through an email of all things. Short, awkward, and full of typos. "I know I messed up. I'm trying to grow up. Hope you're doing okay." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "I am. I hope you are too. We're not close now, and maybe we never will be." But the resentment has faded, replaced by something gentler, acceptance. Sometimes love isn't about starting over. It's about letting go of what can't be fixed and choosing peace anyway. One Sunday morning, I was cleaning out the garage when I saw it again, the BMW covered in a light layer of dust, the same silver shimmer it had that day. I ran my hand along the hood, smiling. It had over 50,000 miles on it now, miles from road trips, grocery runs, late-night drives when I needed to clear my head. That car was never just a gift. It was a turning point. A symbol of the moment I decided I was enough. I sat in the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine purred to life, steady and strong. For years I'd driven everyone else's path, followed everyone else's directions. But this time the road was mine. When I look back now, I don't see revenge the way I used to. Back then, I thought revenge meant winning, proving them wrong. But real revenge, real justice, is peace. It's knowing you no longer owe anyone an explanation for being happy. Life moved on. I finished my degree, built a career I love, and found family in places I never expected, friends who feel like siblings, colleagues who cheer for my wins, a husband who sees me even when I forget to see myself, and soon there'll be someone new to love. I'm due in the fall, our first child. When I felt that first flutter in my stomach, I promised myself something: my child will never grow up believing love means carrying everyone else's weight. They'll learn that boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges that keep love from drowning. Sometimes when I sit in the garden, I think about how far I've come from that wedding day. The girl who cried in her dress because her family told her she didn't deserve her own gift feels like another lifetime. I wish I could tell her that she was never selfish for wanting more. She was just brave enough to stop being small. And if you're still listening to my story, maybe you understand that feeling too. Maybe you've spent years being the reliable one, the fixer, the quiet strength that everyone depends on but no one really sees. I hope you hear this clearly. You deserve more than survival. You deserve joy. Because sometimes the most powerful kind of revenge isn't payback, it's peace. It's choosing to live well, laugh louder, and stop asking for permission to be happy. If you've ever had to walk away from people who didn't value you, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the pieces they left behind, tell me your story below. I'd love to know how you found your peace too. And if my story spoke to you, stay a while. There are more stories here for hearts like ours, stories about courage, healing, and finding your worth again. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think it's time for a drive. The sun's setting, the road is open, and for the first time in my life, I'm not looking back.